Hello and welcome to the Antinihilist channel. I am here to show off the new demo for Scarlet Nexus. It's a game coming out at the end of June, and it's a anime style action RPG basically. I played through the demo. It's got two characters that you can play as, but they're basically the same type of demo. One character specializes in the short-range sword, of course, and the other character is a mid-range card thrower, kinda. It's kind of weird, but they're not too different, except I kind of prefer the sword user just because it flows with the combat a lot better. But I think the card girl is supposed to be the harder option, as you can see from the footage of how it's not doing as much damage, and it's kind of hard to space yourself between enemies. The game overall looks quite good graphically. Just a lot of details on everything, I think. Maybe not as much as you would expect from like an actually realistic looking game, but in my opinion, this is about as good as games can look right now, especially since it's not trying to create realistic looking faces, to be fair. But the backgrounds definitely look very good in my opinion. However, the big issue with the game, from what I can tell, is a problem with the UI. All of these menus and icons really blend together with the rest of the environment, because there's a lot of holographic styles in the environment and in the UI, and so it all just kind of blends together. And then of course some of the backgrounds sometimes aren't looking as good as they could be, like when you're kind of too close to an enemy or something. Like some stuff shakes kind of weird, I don't know, like some of the background shakes, like the windows or something has a weird movement or something. I don't know though, because we're also in a technically not real world location. It's another pseudo world battle area where you don't have to worry about civilians type of thing, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, again, the UI just is a little annoying, and I don't think it's going to get any better because we only have 1 month until the game releases. There's definitely plenty of combat options, with the 4 icons on the bottom right being a representation of the people you're fighting with, and each of those is an ability that they can use. So that's pretty good. I like that a lot. However, of course, the game has a big style over substance problem, as you know, plenty of Japanese games do here and there. But I don't think it's too bad, in that I played on normal difficulty, and I think the style is kind of worth watching and playing, because it's just the beginning of the game. It does seem like you can just kind of wail on enemies and just overpower them, but when the boss of the demo showed up, I was actually having some decent trouble here and there. It definitely wasn't any sort of cakewalk. You could imagine that you can attack all you want, but when it comes to defense, you still are going to have to be aware enough to dodge major enemy attacks. Of course, the telekinetic abilities of the main character ends up making this a little bit of an issue, because you can spam picking up items and throwing them at enemies from a distance. Of course, the thing that's limiting you is that you do have a telekinesis gauge that refills better when you are in close combat. However, the game wants you to be using telekinesis so much that it kind of gets a little bland just seen in the demo, because you just hold R2 and it flings it right at the enemy, and that's a good way to stop the enemy from attacking, get a good portion of their guard down. There's like no downside to just spamming a telekinesis object into the enemy's face. However, there's plenty of other tricks that you can do if you just don't want to use the telekinesis. There's a whole character level tree, of course, since it's an RPG, and a few moves such as uppercut, downswing, and a charge attack for your weapon. You know, kind of typical stuff, but I think considering it's the beginning of the game, I think that it definitely makes me wonder what else they're going to have you be capable of later. There's like this whole drive system that makes me think I just don't know what it even is. You're probably more powerful and stuff, but like it's too minimal right now. Like later on, I feel like it's just gonna get way more powerful as you probably upgrade it in the upgrade tree, but also as you work with your team in a different way here and there. I mean, within the game, the teammates kind of mostly just distract enemies, which is good for me, I think. But there's definitely a lot we're not seeing, I think. Again, on a harder difficulty, you're probably just going to spam the same attacks that you see here over and over, like just probably like twice as much or whatever. But by the middle of the game, or maybe later, I think that there'll be plenty of not context sensitive combat that you'll be able to enjoy. It doesn't seem as if we'll be able to play as any of these characters, which is a little bit disappointing, but admittedly, this is kind of a funded video game. You know about AAA budget? I call this like an A budget. As you can see, all these cutscenes where characters cut in and they just don't want them speaking on screen. I guess it would feel just less in the action, perhaps. So they just make you see these boxes, and it's like, oh, okay, I got the gist of it. To be fair, they don't animate like at all. They just have their face there and just move their lips. So yeah, if you had like an actual cutscene, this would be pretty lame. And they do talk to some person on a communicator or whatever, telepathically. So that would be kind of hard to show in a 3D space. But still, it definitely makes me feel like it's lazier than it should be. But they might just be holding off on the budget for like some big action scene cutscenes. They do show like, you know, one or two, mostly against bosses. So it does seem like they have their priorities straight, at least. But as far as length for this game, based on the upgrade tree, kind of seems like it might only end up being 12, maybe 15 hours. Maybe more, depending on how much you really grind. The problem is that in this demo, I ended up kind of just ignoring all the side paths and just going for the main objective because there's so many extra enemies. And fighting extra enemies isn't really worth it unless you're really leveling up at a noticeable pace. But I'm not really enticed to explore based on what I saw in the demo. Some odd aspects of the game also show up in the menu, where you can see that there's 8 sections for all this information, which is fine, but it's not very stylized. It's like a typical technology computer appearance, so that's kind of lame. And there's just a lot to read, and not a great, again, UI design to read it in. As much as you can spam the R2 button to throw stuff around, they also have these L2 context sensitive, location sensitive moments where you can use an even more powerful move on a foe, which also feels a little bit cheap. Again, on hard mode, or maybe just in normal mode, you can just ignore that. Maybe they just won't have it in hard mode, but I kind of doubt it. The enemy designs are pretty varied actually, but they don't really end up being memorable really. They're just kind of a mishmash of inanimate objects and maybe a few monster creatures or animals just all mixed together. Again, not very memorable. Some of the character designs are pretty good, but that's all up to preference. I won't go too far into that. Considering how few options there are in the close combat action genre, I would definitely recommend this game. At the very least for a lesser price, I suppose, like $40 or something. But considering there's not much to play this year, in my opinion, in this genre, I think it's definitely worth a try. The story probably won't impress you, though, I'll admit. Usually I'm kind of playing Japanese games just for the very unique stories, and while this is a very good setting, the characters don't seem like they are going to react very interestingly to anything that would happen. They're very tropey characters, I would say. I suppose it is worth noting that the girl main character has the preppy, arrogant, and reserved characters filling the roster and just thinking they're above everybody, kinda. And then the guy main character has the kind of everyday people and kind of unhinged or just cavalier characters on his side. So there has been some indication that maybe they'll fight against each other, but I mean, obviously these are gonna be characters that end up fighting together. So who knows where the story might go with how that interaction and gameplay moments might work out, you know? It's hard to tell. It also very obviously shows off that you shouldn't expect any adult characters to be all that important. It's just another one of those anime style games where 20-year-olds or people who look like 20-year-olds are running the whole city or economy, which isn't, again, horrible. It's just definitely not going to be to a lot of people's tastes. I would say you should view it as quick, cheap entertainment, but not that cheap as far as entertainment goes. It shouldn't be forgettable, for instance. If you want to have a good time and just relax while having a very competent fighting system, I think that this game will do a lot of good for you. But if you want any more than that, I'll admit this game isn't going to give you too much more, and that you should probably check out Shin Megami Tensei 3 instead for any RPG desires in the near future. Thanks for watching, and check out the rest of my channel. And as well, please support me on Patreon. Thanks for watching.